It is easy to get confused by all the names of the battles in the Civil War in the East, these iconic battles, Petersburg and Gettysburg and Spotsylvania and Cold Harbor and Winchester and all these other ones. But really, if you put them into context, the war in the East actually consists of rather few grand movements. In 1861, the first major land battle of the Civil War will be fought around Manassas, Virginia at the First Battle of Bull Run. And not a whole lot is happening in 1861 at this point. There's a battle of Ball's Bluff in the east, and there are some other fights to be sure, but both armies are just raising, and there will be a lot of battles ahead. And it did not go well a lot of the time for the Union in the East in 1862. The Union High Command was very concerned with the Confederate dash on Washington, especially because of the Shenandoah Valley. The Shenandoah Valley formed a natural corridor that allowed Confederates to conceal their movement, and every time they used it, they got closer to the Union capital. And to counter that, the Union placed several rather small armies in and around the Shenandoah Valley. Operating amidst those armies, Stonewall Jackson, with an army of around 10,000 soldiers, won victory after victory. His army will then be moved over east of Richmond. George McClellan's Union Army of the Potomac will float out the Chesapeake Bay, land on the Virginia Peninsula formed by the York and the James Rivers, and try to take Richmond from the east. At Fair Oaks or Seven Pines, the Confederate commander Joseph E. Johnston will receive a horrible wound, and that puts him out of the fighting, and a new guy, Robert E. Lee, will take over, and everything changes from that moment onward. Soon after, there's a series of battles initiated by Robert E. Lee, known as the 7 Days Battles, Beaver Dam Creek and Gaines's Mill and Malvern Hill, among others. And in these battles, the Confederates are not terribly successful, but they are successful in pushing the Union Army further away from the capital at Richmond. Robert E. Lee, after this fighting, leaves the Union Army and marches up north. A smaller battle at the Battle of Cedar Mountain will be followed by another much larger one at the Second Battle of Manassas, or the Second Battle of Bull Run. The Confederates are victorious there. They invade the North in September of 1862, and the Union Army, under George McClellan, faces Robert E. Lee again. They fight almost a stalemate. The Union do not capitalize on their gains at the Battle of Antietam, and the seat of war moves further southward, where a new Union commander, Ambrose Burnside, will bloody his army. And after Fredericksburg, both sides pull back and they encamp around the Fredericksburg area at the end of 1862. In 1863, right at the beginning, Joseph Hooker comes up with a brilliant plan, a very elaborate movement around the Confederate flanks, and it will result in the Battle of Chancellorsville. Robert E. Lee was outnumbered more than 2-1. It seemed like there was no way he could win, but yet he did snatch victory away from the jaws of defeat. And after Chancellorsville, Lee invades the North again, and that results in the Battle of Gettysburg. The battlefield on which we stand right now, George Gordon Meade will blunt the Confederate assaults here, and Robert E. Lee will move back down into Virginia. The Union Army will follow, and the war continues onward. But 1863 will close with a real question about what was going to happen next. Ulysses S. Grant takes command of all the Union armies in 1864, and he plans a simultaneous movement east and west, namely toward Atlanta, Georgia, and of course toward the Confederate capital at Richmond, Virginia. And it will result in a series of battles known as the Overland Campaign, at the Wilderness, at Spotsylvania, at North Anna, and the horrible Battle of Cold Harbor. The Union Army will cross the James River and get toward Petersburg, Virginia. The fighting at Petersburg will not only be battles, but it will be a 9-month siege. During that siege, Robert E. Lee, uncomfortable about being trapped, sent a large portion of his army to try to capture Washington, D.C., but eventually they are forced to fall back. There's some horrible fighting in the Shenandoah Valley in the fall of 1864 at the Battle of Third Winchester and at Fisher's Hill and Tom's Brook and Cedar Creek. And after these Union victories within, you are no longer going to have the Confederates really using the Shenandoah Valley at all anymore. 1864 will end on a sour note for the Confederates. Lincoln is reelected. Lincoln is committed to pursuing this war all the way to the end. After a very long winter of 1864, 1865 in the East, mostly spent around the trenches of Petersburg and Richmond, the Union, once the roads are starting to dry, will launch a series of assaults, and eventually at Five Forks, and finally at the breakthrough at Petersburg, the Confederates will be compelled to evacuate Petersburg and evacuate Richmond, and Robert E. Lee's army flees to the west to try to fight on open ground and secure some provisions, something they just cannot do, and they are compelled to surrender on April 9th, 1865 at Appomattox.